High housing prices nationwide are leading many to view renting as a smarter move than purchasing a home, according to a report released Tuesday. More than two-fifths, 44% of renters surveyed by RealPage, said that renting is a better option than buying. The top reason among all surveyed was affordability. Broken down by generations, Generation Z renters led the way with 51% saying renting is the best choice. For the survey, RealPage asked 25 questions to 2,000 multifamily renters ages 55 and below across the country whose income ranged between 20,000 to 200,000. Nearly two-thirds of renters said they are satisfied with their current rental situation as it gives them greater freedom to move and more financial flexibility. Close to three-quarters said renting allows them to live in neighborhoods they could not otherwise afford. The research tells us that most apartment renters are happy being apartment renters. Jay Parsons, chief economist for RealPage, said in a press release. Older renters say they're renting because it frees them up from home maintenance and other responsibilities, he continued. The younger renters are renting because it gives them more flexibility, and renters of all ages tell us that apartments provide an entry into preferred neighborhoods where they couldn't afford to buy. Home prices are rising again after cooling off for a period amid the Federal Reserve's efforts to slow inflation by raising interest rates. A lack of homes also continued to prop up prices to near record highs, and stubborn mortgage rates are making monthly payments even more unaffordable for prospective buyers. This pushes many people back into rental market where prices are also high. Rents have cooled over the past year, but they are still rising. Data from the real estate company Zillow found that asking rents increased by 0.5% in July, bringing the typical monthly payment to $2,062. The most expensive rents were in major metros along the coast. Zillow's report found asking rents were highest in New York City in July at $3,445, beating out San Jose, California by $20 per month. Jesus. Oh man, look, I don't care who gets mad or angry, but I've said before, um, rent is just too damn high. If I can work a job 40 hours a week and each month rake in probably 2,000 something dollars and then have to give 80 or 90% of that just for the rent by itself, not factoring in the cost of gas, food, the electric bill, water, cable. I mean, I've said before, people don't believe me when I say this, but I don't know anyone who is under the age of 40 or 50 that lives somewhere by themselves at all. The only exceptions are people who I know inherited something, or their parents are letting them stay somewhere, or maybe they like chipping a little. I don't know anyone that is that was born in the last 3 decades that is able to live by themselves. And I'm sure some people obviously exist, but I'm just saying that when you think about buying a house, which costs even more than renting, and that's the reason people don't want to buy a place, because of affordability. And you start factoring in that if somewhere, let's say, has a leak or something breaks, you have to go and repair it, and that costs even more money. It makes a lot of sense why people would say, you know what, let me just pay 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 a month, maybe with the help of some roommates, hopefully, for the foreseeable future, because I'm never going to save up enough to ever be able to do anything beyond this. And we talked before about how a lot of people believe that they need 1.8 million to retire, and there are even some older people who are now thinking that they're never going to be able to retire. They're just always going to be having to work like for the rest of their life. It's really disturbing just how much the cost of things are making. I mean, it's making stuff uninhabitable. It's making people believe that they're never going to stop having to work. And it's not because people are going, like, they always do this thing where they talk about, oh, someone who's poor, they go out and they buy stuff and waste their money. But A lot of people are working a full-time job or two jobs and they still can't afford stuff. And I gave the example of how in this article they talk about how rent is 2,000 something dollars on average. And I've explained this before. If we're talking about the $15 minimum wage here in California and we're adding that up for 8 hours a day for 4 weeks, that means at the end of a month I'm left with 2,000 something, a little bit higher than what the rent is. And you could say to yourself, okay, well, what's the big deal? You can pay the rent and you save a couple $100s, but then you factor in that gas, a full tank is like $60. Food for a week on average is like 50, 60. So by the end of it, you really are not left with much of anything. Unless you go and you live with someone else and they pay some and you pay some, and or you split it, which is one option I've seen some people do, and that's really the only way I've seen people live outside of staying with their parents or some other relative indefinitely. Um, but I just reading stories like this are so interesting because I don't pick The Hill as a source I go to just because I love their website and the layout is so sexy. There are stories there that I don't see talked about on any of the major news networks. Whether we're talking about these over 60% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, or the only 4 in 10 Americans are able to afford $1,000 emergency. But there's something to be said when people would rather keep making payments on a home that they're never going to own than buy a home because they know, thanks to the high cost of living, that they'll never be able to afford owning a place. That for the rest of their life, whether they're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, or even 80 years old, they're going to be in this nonstop, never-ending battle of going to work for roughly 40 hours every 4 weeks, right? Getting that 2,000 something every month, and then having to spend most of it on rent, and then having to like squeeze through the crumbs to afford everything else, and hoping that that job doesn't fire you or slash your hours. And then if that happens, you have to worry if you're going to be able to get a second job. I mean, it's. I'll just end by saying this. If somebody wants to take their own life, or, and I'm not advocating for this at all, I understand, because dying is free, but living is ridiculously expensive and seeming to get more expensive by the day.